Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to Xtreme Memories right here on the Wrestling Chatter channel. I'm Kris Kloss, and today we have quite the exclusive. We got a bunch of names for this guy. Ryan Katz, a.k.a. Smiley, a.k.a. GQ Money, a.k.a. Fabian Kalin, a.k.a. one of the Rosebuds. I don't know which one you were, but you were one of the Rosebuds.
I was the lemon.
You were the lemon. Oh, man. We don't want to get a lemon here, but, you know, this is Ryan Katz. And, sir, thank you so much for joining us here. We had a great interview on the last episode. This is episode 2, and we are here with you, Ryan Katz. Currently, you are the creative producer and operation manager of the WWE Performance Center. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Primarily, though, today, like we did on the last episode, we're going to talk about memories, extreme memories. And we have a lot of them. You have a lot of them. I got a lot of them. So hopefully, as we collaborate here, we'll spark up some awesome memories, a journey through time, if you will. And this will be, you know, hopefully a night to remember for some of you fans out there. First off, I want to say thank you to everybody that is still showing interest in this, writing us on our Twitter, the Wrestling Chatter channel Twitter. And so we're going to try to address some of these questions. We incorporated into this interview today, basically to just kind of, as we talk about memories, as we talk about times in XPW, specifically your run, Smiley, in XPW. And in doing that, we're going to kind of incorporate and infuse that into answering all the questions that we've been receiving on Twitter. So thank you, fans. I hope you enjoy this. But let's kick this off right now. Where were you living? Because I know you weren't in Southern California. I know you were doing stuff. Correct me if I'm wrong. We're not going to edit this. I'm going to be asking questions. I don't know. I'm not going to remember everything's precise, but correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong. You are from, well, you were wrestling. You were doing shows. Was it in Denver at the time?
Yeah, so right outside of Denver, Aurora, Colorado. Denver was the home base and home for my wrestling school, my wrestling organization, the CWO, Central Wrestling Organization. And it was there where I knew I wanted to take my career to the next level. And I felt like XPW could be a place to make that happen.
that was going into now. Where are you from originally?
I'm originally from the suburbs of Chicago.
Chicago, that's right. Okay.
Buffalo Grove, Illinois, northwest suburbs outside of the city. A good suburban kid who grew up with in a great. I mean, my high school is generally voted the #1 public high school in the country consistently year after year. Like I had a good little upbringing.
Well, that's, you know, becoming GQ Money. It makes sense.
And I ended up in XPW.
Right. Well, how did you? Okay, so when you were now at that point in time, when you were your school, you were obviously living in Colorado at that time, correct?
Yep.
Okay,
yep.
So and now is that where you were when you first? How did you first hear about XPW?
I first learned of XPW. So I'd say I probably first learned about it in the Sam Goodies or in the store. I forget which store it was. Not FYE, before that. And I think it was Sam Goody, where they had the VHS tapes. So Hardcore Conception. And I won't lie, I didn't love the product when I watched it, but as a wrestling fan, I definitely bought a new wrestling product, and to go check it out at home. And it wasn't really my thing, but it became my thing when I started to read more about it in WOW magazine. And then, dare I say, post Heatwave, when Rob took the one-page ad out of the apology to Paul Heyman, I thought it was brilliant and hysterical, and definitely the place I wanted to go work, that I felt I can go have some fun and some freedom and go really make a name for myself and start a career.
So now, at this point in time, you left. You didn't just leave performing at a different wrestling organization, indie league, but now this was something you were heavily involved with, right? You were training and you were teaching. You were a student. And how did that work in Colorado?
So I was a co-partner in a school and an organization. So in terms of the business aspect, before actually getting my training in wrestling, I was hosting a radio show on my college radio station. And flipping through the papers one day, I saw an advertisement for some guys that were training people to be pro wrestlers. I brought them in, had them on my show, and in the process, or in the goings on of a bit we had created, it got a little out of hand. They swore on the air. I had already been on probation with my radio station for what they claimed I was bootlegging a Roots concert. It's not nonsense. Anyways, I was on probation. They ended up kicking me off the air. And these guys, Dan Magnus and Big Nasty Bobby Black, they felt bad about the situation, but they also realized that they had just met a 21-year-old passionate kid that can talk, had a head on his shoulders, understood some marketing and understood journalism and PR and those aspects. And at the time, when I say I was doing a bit, this was 1999-ish. And I had a webcam going on my own radio show. I was doing my own stuff. I was pretty on the cutting edge of technology, so to speak, knew how to do stuff. And so they realized that, and they reached out to me after getting kicked off the air and said, we had been doing this thing where we're training wrestlers and sending them off to Steve Kern in Florida, because that's who had trained Bobby. And they were just doing these little tryouts to make some money. And then if people wanted to pursue it, they'd tell them where to go. Right. They realized that with me there, maybe we can create something. And we did. And it became a pretty cool thing in Denver and kind of exploded. We got mass media. Like I said, I have a journalism background from school. So we got mass PR exposure, being a part of the Denver Post, the Rocky Mountain News, all three of the major TV news stations. I did a political roundtable discussion on PBS as a young promoter in the area. And we were revving up and bringing in good crowds. Like my smallest show for CWO was 371 people with as high as about 1,500. And then when I actually left, they topped me when they started bringing in some names, because we were doing most of that without names at all. We just became this cool entertainment in Denver. Dare I say, similar to how Hood Slam became something interesting and fun for NorCal, and how PWG became the diehard wrestling product, for Southern California. ROH at that point on the East Coast, or whatever it was, it wasn't around back then, but I'm just saying as the example, CWO had this Denver niche where we were just this cool entertainment thing, and the local media liked to talk about it and cover it, and it was exciting and it was new and fresh. And our school had its gym in this gymnastics facility. So like our ring was in this place that had the suspension floor and crash mats and trampolines and foam pits, and like it was just amazing. My first match, I got DVD'd off the top rope. I mean, like nowadays I'm sitting there in a position where I work where we're like, you don't do crazy stuff. There's got to be a reason and the psychology behind it. And meanwhile, I freaking did a missile drop kick the first day I was ever in a ring, oddly, is that it was just this, this was the end of the ECW era at that point. Right. So there was this balls to the wall mentality of we're going to do crazy stuff and we're going to be exciting and we're going to turn heads and wow people. And like I said, in flipping through the magazines, I started seeing that mentality just through the advertising of Rob Black, and I wanted to be a part of it. I was kind of becoming on the outs with my partner. Like, the school took a different direction. We started putting people into the shows that weren't ready to be in shows because they were paying money. Like, we became some of what you hear the bad reputation of bad wrestling schools are. And I think we just became a victim of our own success. And in the end, that hurt us. And there was a split, and it was time for me to go because I knew I wanted a long-term career. And my partner was at that point focusing on trying to just some other stuff, and then getting his girlfriend, hired by WWE at the time, whose developmental was OVW, and all these things, differences of opinion, water under the bridge at that point. But it was time to go, and it was time for me to make a name for myself and start a career. And that's when I started the correspondence with Kevin Kleinrock and XPW.
So, all right, Ryan, going back to what you were saying, just kind of how things transpired business-wise in Denver, it seemed like that was just kind of like the stars were aligned for you at that point, because originally, knowing your background in Colorado, all the steam you guys were getting, it seemed like why would I leave this? But then when you tell me And vaguely, I kind of remember you saying, kind of talking when we were just shooting the shit years ago. I vaguely remember this, you know, when you showed me pictures of Denver, that something like that did transpire. Now, when you were kind of deciding at that time, hey, maybe I should move on, was that like pretty close to the time when you saw that ad in Wow Magazine?
So I think seeing that ad I knew this is what I wanted to do. And let's be honest, I sent packages out to XPW, to UPW, and to OVW. Those were the three places I went to pursue for relocation, so to speak. I got contacted by UPW and XPW. So I set up a trip to LA where I drove out to LA. We talk about stars aligning. The stars weren't necessarily aligning for this to be a successful transition in the beginning.
Right.
I think it was November, Metal Fest season for you guys, for XPW at the time. I drove out from Colorado to LA in my car, and my car broke down in Green River, Utah. I
remember this. Yeah, I remember you talking about
I had 2 interviews set up with UPW and XPW. So after my car was broken down and was going to be stranded, like I was kind of stuck for a few days, I ended up having to get a flight to Utah. But the only way to do that from where my car was stranded was to take a 2-hour tow truck drive drive in a tow truck with this guy who ended up taking me to the airport, like after dropping off my car. Oh, it was just nonsense in all this. I go out, I meet with UPW. The meeting was fine and cool. I found that it seemed like that was less on performance, more on production for them. And they seemed to want me to work a 40-hour work week for free as if I was an intern. And it really wasn't what I was looking for, to go relocate across the country. And then I met with XPW, and I had a quick meeting with Kevin, and things were cool. And I was told to go up to San Bernardino and check out the show at Metal Fest, and there'd be tickets for me at the door. And I go up to San Bernardino. I take a drive with my buddies. I had some people with me from California, from my friends out there. And we took the 2-hour drive or whatever it is, and there were no tickets for us. And I'm just like, oh, what a start. Right. I'm like, these guys suck. Like, I couldn't believe it. I was like, how unprofessional. I went out of my way. I even think, if we're going back, once again, I got a terrible memory. My noggin's a little rocked. But I think even before, when they were setting up, like when I said I had that quick meeting with Kevin and the setup was for me to go to San Bernardino to check out the show, like I think I had to wait for like 2 hours outside the Van Nuys office to get the opportunity to talk to them, like, which I learned became a common trend in the XPW ways. Yeah. But all of that, so I left this thing out money that I didn't really have for plane tickets and making stuff happen, out money for my car that broke down, no tickets. I felt like UPW was this cookie cutter product that I really didn't want to be a part of. I kind of was interested in XPW, but was completely turned off on what it was. And then I went home. So that was November of 1999, I believe, or 2000, November 2000. Yep, November 2000.
That was post. That was when we were done with the LA Sports Arena, and then we did Metal Fest in November of 2000, and then there was just this big lull. We were trying to kind of figure things out, and now, okay, so that kind of answered my next question. When let's say you were in Denver, and people, the buzz about professional wrestling, were the things that you heard about XPW, were they positive? Were they negative? Now, I know you had your direct experience, but like the buzz for you, other than seeing that Wow magazine, what was the vibe? Or look, it was just, you were in wrestling. What is the best viable solution for me type thing?
That was it. I'm 22, 23. I don't know at this point, but what's my next step? So even after that experience, when I got back, I'm still thinking, what's the next step? I'm on the outs. Like me and my partner had a fallout. So I don't have a spot where I'm doing my thing anymore after the year and a half of being on top of the world kind of thing there. What's next? So I continue to speak to Kevin. And there's a big talk of, well, what can we do? And once again, without, it wasn't that there was tons of money being thrown around, that it's contracts being offered to go work for XPW or something. So like Kevin's just like, well, look, it's not like we can fly you out for shows. Like it's not really in our budget. But like if you're in California, you know, talk to me. We like what you got, but let's just see where this goes in the future.
It's funny when you say like there weren't big contracts. Like this was kind of like to explain to people, this was kind of like a step up, a significant step up from the independents, television, all this stuff.
Absolutely. This was going to be the next big ECW. This was, in theory, the biggest of the small time that had a chance to be something major.
And it wasn't like we had like substantial at that time competition on the West Coast, because people need to realize like back then the indie scene was in some ways non-existent, to the point where to compare it to today, it's totally different. And UPW was kind of an exception because they were
the developmental.
They were a farm league for
which obviously is why that was the second choice of me trying to pursue a career. Obviously, the overall goal is to make it and become a big star in WWE and be a superstar. You know, as I said, when I saw them in action, it was just very cookie cutter, and I knew not what I was going to necessarily be able to go get over as, because I wasn't the prototypical guy that they wanted. So you had to make some experiments. But I got to interrupt real quick, because as I'm looking at you through this split screen window, every once in a while I feel like I may be watching a deep fake video where Rob Black's face starts to intermeld with yours with the shape of this hair and goatee and stuff.
This is all COVID. This is all COVID. No, I'm kind of on hiatus right now. I'm an auctioneer, so we're not doing any auctions, and so I have a good reason to kind of go. If I'm gonna do it, I'm just gonna grow my hair, grow beard, because I'm very clean cut in the auction world. So this is kind of some enjoyable downtime, and this is one of the perks right now, taking advantage of something like this, doing something like this. But yeah, thank you for noticing. So let me ask you this. So getting to the point where you are coming to XPW, before we get to that, where were you, let's say, when after ECW's? No, well, I was gonna say, yeah, exactly. But no, going back, actually, now that you mentioned that, and then you became GQ Money. But going back to
smoke and mirrors, baby. GQ got no money.
That's right. Going back to like where we're kind of comparing, like where we're ranking XPW in the wrestling world. You know, above the indies, below the major corporate wrestling companies at the time. There was this like, hey, we're going to take care of you though. We're going to take care of you. We're going to give you exposure. We're going to give you freedom, like you said. There was no political correctness behind the cameras, let alone on camera, right? In XPW.
Correct.
But
absolutely.
But now, where were you? So leading up to even coming into XPW, where were you, and what did you know about, let's say, ECW's Heatwave in 2000? Did you know at the time of XPW's involvement? Because that was a good 6 months earlier. It was the summer of 2000, and you didn't come until, let's say, late 2000.
Correct. So that all, I wasn't so familiar with it live. Like I said, my exposure, I think, came from reading about the letter. And I watched ECW pay-per-views, but I don't know that I would have known what was going on or following the stuff. I'll be honest, having started my quote own wrestling organization, I had never really gone to indie wrestling before I ever saw that. Even growing up, I wasn't an indie. I was a diehard wrestling fan my whole life.
Right.
But I kind of hated indie wrestling, like in a weird way. I remember as a high school wrestler, when I would go to some of the other high schools and see the flyers, I found that most of the time on those flyers for indie shows, it was a lot of like rip-off type characters. So to me, I'd be like, who are these fake Road Warriors? Who's this fake Rick Rude? And I didn't want to see that stuff, because I was like, it's not the real deal, which I think is what we all, as we grow up, you learn that, hey, it's cool to like the smaller stuff, and the ones getting it, what seems like it's not cool as a little kid, man, blah, 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 reverses and changes in times.
Yes.
But like, I wasn't into it. And one of the reasons that I knew with those partners that we can start this wrestling company in Denver, the first indie show show I went to was a version of the AWA in Denver, and they were at a great venue, downtown Denver, at a bar type venue that was really cool. And they drew like 26 people, and they hyped a cage match. And in that cage match, they just put one piece of cage, leaned it on the ring. And I think the biggest high spot in the show I saw was a suplex, and one dude wearing a mask puked in his match and was puking through his mask. And,
Nice.
and this was my exposure going, well, if this is what's going on in Denver for wrestling, I know I could make better than this.
Right.
And that's what we did. So like that was all that how this all came to play. So I didn't really know of other wrestling going on, and I didn't know of East Coast feds. I didn't know about that. Like my exposure to getting trained and starting was by doing it with people who have done it. So like my trainers were legit. Like Bobby was legit, and Dan Magnus was a former world champion kickboxer who was friends with a lot of the wrestlers in Hawaii, but also had karate schools and was able to kind of take the fundamentals of what we do, break it down in its most simplistic form to, dare I say, make it mainstream, in terms of wrestling training, making it accessible to the people that didn't necessarily want it to be their full-time career, but just wanted to love and try wrestling. And I'm so grateful of that. And going back to the training style, Dan's training style was soft. And I remember like those other local wrestlers like looked down upon us that we did things wrong. We didn't have good psychology. We were trained. We weren't being trained properly. We like all these things. We were soft because we did everything on crash mats. And it was like, I'm 43 years old right now. I used to do crazy, crazy bumps, and I don't have the aches and pains that most wrestlers talk about. I got little things, and I've hurt myself in the ring and all that. I'm not taking anything away. It's tough. It hurts. And I also had a prima donna schedule where I don't wrestle 4 days a week, where of course I'm nursing nagging injuries constantly. But like Dan's style on that mat made me be the springy, wiry, loose, limber guy that can take those bumps and not get hurt. We'll get to it later, but it allows me to take the 30-foot ship bomb with Angel and wake up the next day and I think I broke 7 different things and I'm hurting. No, I was freaking great and like on top of the world that next morning. And I'm supposed to say that that's not the case. And I'll be honest, Angel wasn't feeling that good. His arm was jacked up from carrying, holding my weight and getting the bump. But like, wow. But I was great. And I credit that to my training style, which was very untraditional in the sense of pro wrestling.
I remember certain times when like, until you did something, if I, as the announcer, like took a bump, went through a table or got attacked in the TV studios, and I remember finding out, it wasn't until then, after it had been in the business, I didn't find out like, oh, that hurts you more than it does me, and so the boys, whoever it was at the time, they took care of you, and they're like, no, you got to explain how to blade, all this stuff that I've gone through, but no, it was one of those things where you don't know until you experience it. You can hear it till your ears come up, and you probably won't even remember it because you didn't have that direct experience. But that was definitely, that's interesting as far as you go, because specifically for you, speaking of before we get into Angel, like all the stuff that you were involved with, which was considered high risk aspects of professional wrestling.
Did a lot of dangerous stuff.
Yeah, you did, man. But let's fast forward a little bit because okay, so now that you're in XPW, okay, and when we were talking about the talent and how things ran.
Can I stop you for 1 second? Let's get one more step that gets me to XPW because it's kind of important. Because there was a final thing I said to Kevin, which really made him want me to come, and it was when my buddy hits me up in January or December and says, "Dude, we got to go to California. Let's just do it. Screw it. We got to go." So I call up Kevin and I say, "All right, I know you said that you can't fly me out, this and that. What if I were to say I was going to move there and I'm going to bring a 7-footer with me?" That was kind of the magic words that changed everything.
Oh, okay. The Giant. The Giant. Yeah, he was the Giant, along with you're talking about motivational speaker extraordinaire TJ Rush.
Absolutely.
Changed a lot of guys' lives. It really did.
So the 3 of us went out together. and then we came to XPW. But it was all three of us. And just to give you one final story of how this works, and then we can get into more of the in-ring stories and all that. So all three of us go to meet with Kevin and Rob at the office about jobs. And what I know is that Kevin has 2 jobs available. He's got a secretary job for Xtreme, the parent company, and also a warehouse job. So Kevin is expecting that I am going to take the secretary job because I'm the fast tongue talker, and that the Giant, as this big guy, is going to take the warehouse job. What ended up happening is the Giant took the secretary job and TJ Rush took the warehouse job. And it completely was mind-blowing to everyone, because I didn't take that job at first because I had grand delusions that I was going to go score some amazing Hollywood gig while doing wrestling on the side. So.
Right. Well,
and then I finally, a month later, went to Rob. What can we do? And then he hired me for some side stuff on the computer.
Dime a dozen.
Editing and shooting and websites and all of that.
Yeah, well, that was great, and that was it's amazing, some of our stories, like how we became got to the places we became, But that was very interesting, because it was like you made a deal with him essentially, and incidentally. Everything was a kind of a chain reaction. We'll get to that right now, because
and he took care of me very well from that point on.
Yeah, if you had jobs, if you were helping out and all that, they would.
But I tried to bribe him. I tried to bribe him to get the job. I remember when I was finally, because once again, Scott and TJ had the jobs, and it was, dude, I need some work. We got to get me going. Talk to Rob. Right. What can you do? So they set up a little meeting for me to go in and talk to him. And I remember coming in my suit and my cufflinks and bringing him a large pizza pie from Amici's. So I was like, let's talk over some pizza.
That's cool, man. That's awesome. So what were your first impressions, though, once you got into XPW? We all know your impressions of when you were trying to get the job, when you're trying to get in, no tickets and all this stuff. But once you saw the operation, once you saw the thoughts that went into everything as far as storyline and all that, and Kevin and Rob, a lot of times people don't give them credit, and you don't have to like them, but you got to give them credit as far as I'm concerned. What was your first impressions? Because going back also to, for example, like the boys, when we'd have our meetings and all that, Rob was very strict about, hey, internet, SoCal Uncensored, all that. You guys are not going to go on there. We had this kayfabe within, not only in wrestling, but within our own company. And it was very serious about that. If we're going to be looking at ourselves on television, at the LA Sports Arena, at the Grand Olympic, this is
they shouldn't be posting on a board like that.
Right. So we had this kind of like this exclusivity that, let's say, again, I hate to compare us to indie feds, but that no indie feds really held in high priority. But that's what we did. So talking about like what your impressions were behind the scenes, things like that, things like the weekly television show. What were your impressions when you got back there, when you got into XPW?
So my first impression, of course, is what a dump and what a shit show. But I want to be involved so bad. But I want to be a part of it. No, like the policies in terms of XPW, I love. The exclusivity is great. People talk down about exclusivity, but Rob wasn't a douche with his exclusivity. Like his thing was, don't wrestle in SoCal. If you want to take the drive to an outside area, you were able to go do that. Don't wrestle you're exclusive in SoCal, because why would someone go pay premium prices for XPW shows to see XPW present people as stars on TV, marketed, promoted, packaged, storied, charactered, all of that, or go pay $10 to go see him at the flea market on a random day? We were a premium product, and we made that special. That's why the NorCal crew was able to still go wrestle up in NorCal. They took a 6-hour drive to come down. They weren't competing with us in SoCal. So I thought that stuff was very cool. Also, It wasn't the type of thing where you see sometimes in indie wrestling now, where an indie promoter wants to say, "Oh, you're exclusive to me, you can't work for anyone else," and they pay guys $10, $20. Like, if I'm not mistaken, even back then, the lowest payout I think was $100 on an XPW show. So you were still making money, and that was the low payout. So once again, guys making $1,000, some of them. So Like, I think those are good things, and that built it. The policy, social media, man. Like, of course you're going to read it and you want to see what people say, but don't get involved and be a mark and respond to all the stuff. Like, don't be a mark. I got to be honest, in the position I'm at right now, I'm amazed at how much people are marks for themselves. Like, for my job right now, when people come in as extras, they can't wait to take their picture in front of the NXT truck. And it's like, I find it embarrassing and disgraceful because the piece of me was always taught, put that phone away. Like, it's not about bragging and showing off in that opportunity. Do the job, get the gig. Because right now, you're just like, dare I say, and I say it with respect, but like, you're here as an extra. You didn't make it. Like, I still don't consider that I made it in the job that I'm in. Like, so like, I hate the quote braggadocious of, oh, look at me, I'm here. The same as when people do the tax envelope things, like it's supposed to be like, but don't be a mark. Rob was straight up that way. Don't be a mark. Like,
I think too, like in the beginning and throughout time, he was constantly sifting people in and out based on all that, constantly. I remember when XPW just came about and everybody came over from SECW, UIWA. This was in '98, before the year before it launched. And then in early '99, we all had a meeting. Literally, like the next week, half of everybody was gone. Half was gone from just one day of Rob maybe walking through the office. Everyone's there. Within an hour span, he figured out who he wanted and who he didn't, based on everyone's just shooting the shit conversation throughout. So fortunately I got held on, and the guys that did, but like half the people were just gone, and then after those people were gone, he still had to talk and reinforce this idea to the people that were still there, but that was the appreciation. And like you said, people that take their pictures and selfies, of course, nowadays it's prevalent, but it's almost like, if you're going to be next to a big logo, like when we were MTV, I remember there were a few guys with the backdrop, with the WSX backdrop, and like they were like, oh, when do I get my, I won't name names, but like, when do I get my picture taken, all this stuff. I was like, man, dude, like they didn't have you're not looking at what you're doing right now. You're doing a wrestling show. You're not doing, oh, I already am in a wrestling show. Like that's going to come. That's obviously, it's only natural. It's going to be part of this, but that's, I mean, at that point with WSX, everybody, it was a different world. It was not the Wild West of XPW. It was very corporate. Everybody was signed on, and it was,
XPW is amazing. XPW is amazing.
I mean, it was
let's be real. Let's be real, dude. At the point where I'm at in my life, I don't know that I can go back and do it again. But at the point I was in my life, but at the point that I was in my life then, I mean, come on. I'm in my young 20, or mid 20s, working for a company that's doing the biggest and best of the biggest of the small time wrestling in the country. So the top of the indies, national distribution. Like, I remember going on a trip to New York and seeing the XPW calendar on a newsstand when I got off the subway. Wild. Like, it's like crazy stuff. All these cool things in the stores with the DVDs. Like, it was real deal. And I was doing that. And it was just this fun time of, as you say, Wild West. And as a young kid who wants to get into the wild world of entertainment, I mean, dare I say, it was a little bit gangster. And gangster was appealing and cool and dangerous and scary. And everything about XPW had, I want to say walking on eggshells, but not in this in the sense of like, oh, you're scared and nervous of like, oh, I don't want to piss people off. Walking on eggshells because of the feeling that something crazy may happen. More so like a haunted house, is you don't know what's going to come out at you.
Yeah, true. And that was like, again, like, so when you, I'll just bring I know you weren't really hearing about it, but like the Heatwave incident, basically like exemplified what we kind of were. Like, let's just do something crazy that's not in the schedule right now, and we talked about that before, but it was something to the point where like you said, it was gangster. It was you didn't know what was going to happen next, and it was real. It was all very real. Everything was real. Like the Heatwave incident was real. That really happened. It wasn't a staged invasion.
The free fall incident was very real. And the genocide cage where the audience felt like the cage was going to collapse on them. It was real.
The half cage. The half cage, right? Not even fully erect, right? Okay, so let's
that usually wasn't an issue at XPW.
Right. Before I talk to you about a great feud that you had in XPW, which was against Angel, you guys really worked fantastic together to the point where it even carried out.
Chris, getting hot talking about it.
Yeah,
it's exciting. It's exciting.
Exactly, dude. Me too, man. So your feud with Angel, but of course it would even carry on to, which we'll talk about later, the reunion Cold Day in Hell show. But which was awesome spot, by the way. I still appreciate that spot with the whole press. That was very good. I'm not just saying that, man. I think that was a highlight of that show, creatively, for real.
Thank you.
Yeah. But now let's go into, whose idea was it to get paired up with Kaos? He was Kid Kaos at the time, and so he was not this like the heel that we all knew. He was like this kind of baby face, up and coming youngster, making his way up, drinking, doing the right thing, going to bed on time, drinking enough calcium, drinking enough milk and all that. And, getting up bright and early and calling his mom to say how much he loved him. Like he was the little up and coming baby face. So then you got paired up with Kaos, and then you formed the faction, the Enterprise. Yeah. And this was kind of cool because it as we were gaining steam on television, you guys were just almost like had this cutting edge kind of feel to you guys, but you definitely were pushing the envelope within a company that was already pushing an envelope. So whose idea was that? Whose idea was the Enterprise for you to get paired up with Kaos? And of course, this is now we're going to see the evolution of and the creation and evolution of the character GQ Money, the character that had so many facets and characters within the character GQ Money, talking about Clockwork Orange, talking about all these different characters that you adopted and translated to the television audience, to a wrestling audience.
So this is where it gets interesting on how did it come to be, because originally from me coming in, they wanted me to XPW wanted me to wrestle, and we're going to put me in a tag team with the person who became Youth Suicide, with Andre. Right. And it was going to be a Clockwork Orange based tag team called Ultraviolence with me and Andre. And at that point I told them, yeah, but I don't really want to be a wrestler. I just want to be a manager. And they said, okay, cool. I think at that point, from that point on, Rob knew exactly what he wanted to do. Because even going back from so that whole talk of the tag team stuff was before the final jobs and all that. Like this was before I was finally really full-fledged working and all that. So at one of my first shows, was it Payback Birmingham High, the New Jack first show with Vic and the first one where New Jack shows up?
Payback was
Payback's a bitch. No. Maybe it was a New Year's Revolution because it wasn't January.
Payback, I want to say, was in the Grand Olympics. So no, I'll find out here. I'll find out.
So it's probably a New Year's Revolution because it was a January show, New Jack's first show. But before the
New Year's Revolution, 2001.
Yeah.
So
before the show started, when me, the Giant, and TJ were just sitting in the bleachers, as everything was going, Lizzie Borden walked up to me. This is before we had made the final, like everything was good. But Lizzie Borden walked up to me, and I hadn't met her yet. And she reaches her hand out to shake my hand. She's like, "You must be GQ Money." And I was like, "I don't know. I guess maybe I am." And that was kind of, she gave me the name right there. So obviously Rob had talked about it and met me, knew what I was, like my vibe and gave me the moniker. But so she came up and kind of named me before I even knew I had a job, to be honest. It was kind of interesting. I would say the idea was Rob's. Now, here's where the genius of XPW comes in that they don't get credit for, is that long-term storytelling and planning. Rob knew for months where he was going with this Chaos storyline. I debuted at the Olympic, and from the day I debuted, it was starting out with this feud where we're kind of picking on Chaos a little bit. But every time we did something, we filmed these alternative type of angle, like the behind the scenes, because we knew we were going to do the eventual reveal for when he came into the Enterprise. But like that was like a 2-3 month storyline build of us trying to attract Chaos. But I'll say that it wasn't like we were just coming up with it on the fly. Like Rob and Kevin had that planned out from the beginning and knew that that's where they wanted to go and what they were doing. And it was awesome. And then it's available on, the story of the Enterprise is on my YouTube channel and stuff. And it's a bunch of the edited vignettes of when he finally came to us. And Rob had that brilliant plan that people thought he was crazy for and didn't respect, and told him how stupid he was, of shooting Chaos with only the TV title, the championship belts, only showing his waist, never showing his face for over a month of TV. And what are you doing? It's stupid, and blah, blah, blah. And ended up being the repackaging when we came out and finally showed him with the blonde hair and revealed the Enterprise's repackaged Rock Superstar. But once again, Rob knew where he was going that whole time. Rob and Kevin, like, they put this stuff together that told great stories and had depth and had turns and had, like, we broke into to Chaos's house, but then we were like in an attack thing once, but then we revealed that there was an exchange of a key or we broke into Supreme's house to steal something, and then there was the exchange of the key where we see Joey slip it to like all these things happening that like this clever stuff that I don't think anyone even currently does that level of character development and storytelling on their wrestling shows.
Yeah, I remember thinking that too back in the day, like watching our product and I thinking like, wow, that was cool because, also not only just watching it, but being in the office and then looking at the blackboard, going into the story, then watching it play out. I remember I kind of had to like ask myself, am I being honest with myself? Am I being just biased because I'm a part of this and I'm the host? But I was like, I think this is like better than what I'm seeing on wrestling television. But I at the time I was conflicted because I was probably beating myself up too much. Like, no, I'm just being biased right now because I'm part of it. But I do look back now in retrospect, like, no, that was creative. That was good. The television product had a lot of thought and care and strategy that went into it. So
there's obviously always going to be a bias being involved. I'm currently involved in a product that I think is the best wrestling product on TV. Obviously, I have a bias in saying so. I have a bias to think that when I was in XPW, it was incredible. But here's the deal. As much as we got shit on, the experience was incredible. The excitement was palpable. There was something in the air at every show. There was a feeling of like, once again, it was the feeling that someone may die tonight, and it carried over. So when I left XPW, when XPW kind of went under, and I was in TNA in Nashville, that was in their boom when they were kind of getting their stride on their weekly pay-per-views at the Nashville Fairgrounds, and never once did I get the feeling at a TNA show like I had an XPW.
Yeah, no.
I sit and I go like, man, for a company that got shit on so much that we were the worst representation of pro wrestling and we were horrible and a disgrace and how dare us and everything, this and that, man, our shows were better. They just were.
Yeah, they just had that something was thick in the air, whether you were backstage, whether you were in the arena. Nothing was watered down at all. Quite the contrary. And that was like when we did WSX, as exciting as that was, being on MTV and all that, that part of it was very cool. Like we had the opportunity at that time to live out our dream and put out our own individual art and now have a platform for it because it was national television. However, during that, it's true. And this is where I think Rob Black doesn't get a lot of the credit because Rob Black did bring a lot of that realism to the product. And that in some ways is transmitted from him in large part to the product, which, look, let's be honest, we didn't have that in WSX. Like you said, you didn't experience that in TNA. We didn't even experience that at Cold Day in Hell. Or XPW 10, the 10-year anniversary. So that in large part is why a lot of people liked XPW and didn't quite know why they liked it, but they had that, like you said, that feeling inside of that haunted house type, what's going to happen next. And yeah, so it was just
through it all, Kris, here's the deal. As rough and as gruff and as unkempt and uncouth as he is, Rob Black was the motherfucking man. And if you were on his side, it was freaking cool to be around him. And he did awesome stuff, and he made things matter. And there was a magnetic charisma and charismatic attraction. And I've had my fights and my fallouts, and we don't want to talk, and I've walked out on him and this and that, and he's fired and kicked me out, and we've reconciled and this and that. Hey, dude, such a part of my life and form. His crazy outlandishness allowed me to become who I am today, and I'm real proud of who that became.
I got a funny story. One night we went out. I think it was Sabu and Shane Douglas. Gosh, I can't remember, but it was. Or it might have been Big Dick Dudley. Shoot, I can't remember. But it was 2 or 3 of the old ECW guys. And Kevin was there. Webb was there. And we were all going to like Benihana's. We were going to, or, hibachi style.
Teppanyaki.
Japanese style. And so we all go there. And we get this giant...
What was the restaurant called? Because that was a big thing. It started with an M. No, because Rob used to go to a specific one. Northridge,
no, it was that one, but I don't remember the name right now, fan. If I can find it, I will. But
because I remember, I always wanted to be invited to, because he would do a weekly dinner there, and I always wanted to be invited, and I wasn't at that point. And when I finally got invited to dinner, we changed locations, thankfully, to a cool place. It was great, but
so we go there, and it was a giant table. It was bigger than normal, and we go there, and there were this old couple was there, this young yuppie couple was there. And just proper as can be, and then one other guy, and I was just thinking wow, this is going to be interesting, So we all go sit down there, and right when Rob started talking, he was loud, he was abrasive, and everybody was just kind of oh, God, who is this guy? What's he saying? He was cussing, he was doing all this stuff, and as proper as can be. I shit you not, when we left that place, by the time we were done eating, and toward the end.
Musashi.
Rob. Okay, there you go. I trust you. I believe you. So by the time we were all done, by the time the last 5 minutes, I remember looking over at these people, and all these older people, the 2 old couple, the 2 yuppies that would have nothing to do with this world we're in. They were all just everybody. They weren't even talking to each other. They were all just listening, looking at Rob. Everybody, he just had this whole place captivated just by talking. Even these other people that you could tell, I felt bad for them when we first got there, because everything was so rough around the edges with us, and they were going to scare these people off. And he was talking about, the everything and language, all that. And they didn't care. People were just looking at him like they knew him, like they were watching television or something. I remember thinking after that, that's pretty cool. He had that. He had that to captivate and the imagination too. So yeah, when people say, "Oh, XPW sucked" and all this, look, a lot of people, we had our flaws. I'm not saying we didn't, and there were things that I would get frustrated with too, why are we doing this? Why is this happening? But we were also
nothing more frustrating than the moves between buildings.
Yeah, that's true too, man.
Just because we had no organization, so you'd move the same thing of boxes 8 times instead of once or twice.
Yeah, but going back with the fans, I remember there were things that people just weren't prepared for. They didn't quite understand, or I dare to say it was too real for some of these fans. And that's why when the heat wave happened, it was fashionable to hate us at that time. And now when I talk to people online, when people approach me and all this, I was telling Kevin the same thing. People are now starting, I'm noticing, to kind of have a fond memory of our invasion where they never would before. Because at the time, in that shocking moment, it was hey man, this is messed up. That's a little too real. But at that time too, the fans were we're tired of 80s cartoon wrestling. We want it real. We want it real. And then when real things happen, it was oh, that was messed up. You guys shouldn't have done that. But now, like I said, since the shock value is gone, and you look back at exactly what happened, this is where I have conversation with people, and they're telling me yeah, that was cool, man. Oh, I would have been with you. Yeah, that was awesome. especially now that I know ECW was like in working with WWE at the time, all this stuff. But it's funny how things like this throughout history, not just in wrestling, things that are maybe shocking against the grain in the moment become the hip thing later on, in pop culture, in history, anywhere. And this is, to me, again, I wouldn't have been saying this because I was part of it. I already know the history. But now that I'm listening to people talk to me personally online, saying like, "Oh, I didn't know you guys did that. Oh, that was awesome," and thinking like, I just kind of see this kind of glamorization of it.
Drew McIntyre always wants to ask me XPW stories. He loves it. Always wants to know, what can you tell me? Tell me something good. Like he always like. I ended up spending a trip where we went to his home in Scotland together. So a few hours in a car because he wanted me to because he wanted to have stories and stuff. It was so like, no, there's so many people that do come up to me now. Not so many, but a few that have their memories and were excited by it. And the reputation seemingly has gone away. I mean, at the time there was a feeling you were going to be blackballed from the industry.
Right. No, that's again, like this show, for example, it's just, no, this is the wrestling business and things happen and then they move on, but people like, for example, that I've talked to that have approached me on Facebook, whatever, asking about this, that never heard of this before until they watched Heatwave on the WWE Network. And then after watching Heatwave on the WWE Network, they done their research about it and looked more into it and like, wow, I didn't know this. Dang, that was awesome. How come I've never heard about this before? And just kind of explaining to them like, well, your reaction right now is totally the opposite of these hardcore fans back in the day that wanted real shit. So I'm trying to tell them, like, I can't explain to you what you're saying makes sense, but I can't explain why it played out the opposite. It
played out the opposite because Rob's personality was a big F.
Well, of course, and I got into that too, and the reaction was like, "Cool, who cares? That's awesome, that's cool." I'm like, "Buddy, I just that's all I could tell you, man." And it was interesting how it was hard for him to understand that. This is like, I don't remember how old, like these are people that like in their 20s now, like they were little kids when ECW was around, right? But okay, so let's go fast forward now, Smiley.
Angel.
Let's go into one of your best feuds, maybe probably your best feud in XPW was with Angel, known as the hardcore homo from way West Hollywood, California. Angel, yes, and you guys had this feud that was pretty monumental. You guys definitely worked well together. You guys knew how to work off of each other. You guys knew how to complement one another. When one guy would get fired up, the other guy would be taking the bumps over the top, making the other look good, and in very reminiscent ways of, let's say, like when I watch old matches with Stunning Steve Austin and Ricky Steamboat. If you watch those matches, once Ricky Steamboat gets fired up, Austin just goes that much more into getting punished, and it was just an art form how those guys work together. So you guys, in your own way, of course, I know the storyline's way different than, let's say, early 90s WCW. However, the psychology was still there, though. The psychology was beautiful to watch. And you guys knew not only how to play off each other in the ring, but with promos, all this stuff. It just again, this feud, you had everything. The it factor within a feud was there.
I mean, thank you. I mean, and like, it makes me feel cool, like just feel good and get all a little choked up.
No, it's true. It's true,
because Angel and I had something to prove. Like, we were the, dare I say, little guys, or the ones that weren't necessarily being taken serious. We were overly character and smaller. So it wasn't, they're fun to watch, but whatever they can do, they do. And me and Angel always wanted to, or Angel and I always wanted to steal the show. We always wanted to exceed people's expectations, blow their minds, turn their heads, make them say, oh my God, I didn't realize they can do that. And that was always our intent. And we'd put in the work, and we'd discuss, and we'd brainstorm, and we'd train, and we'd practice, and we'd come up with sequences, and we just tried to always outdo ourselves. And each time we got a chance to wrestle again, take it to the next level and exceed, which is what XPW did a lot of times on those shows, is every show had to exceed itself and take itself up a notch, which does become tough to do consistently.
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
But we generally found a way.
Yeah. Now, what would in your mind for your guys' feud? What was the highlight? What was, or as far as match goes?
So right from the beginning, the very first Halloween in Hell 2, it's a Blown to Hell 2, the DVD, Halloween in Hell. So that's got to be 2000. That's got to be Halloween 2001 is my guess at that point.
Yeah, Pico Rivera.
Yeah, Pico Rivera, my favorite venue of all time. Like I love it. Love the Bull Ring. Think it's the greatest. Had many great memories there. Me and Angel blew people's minds and showed them that we knew how to wrestle. And that's where you coined, it's not the circumcision, or in GQ's money case, it's the brists, or the circumciser. In GQ's money case, it's the brists.
Yeah.
My favorite commentary line for me ever.
I remember you came up to me like after that aired, or you called me actually, like 5 minutes after it aired, like the wrist.
It made me laugh so much. But like, even it's funny, I'll go read DVD reviews on Amazon. It's like people put it over that it was, and it's not that it was the greatest wrestling. Like if I go back now, I could nitpick 50 million things and tell you how I sucked. But we blew. It was beyond people's expectations, and we were pushing ourselves. Now the best and my favorite match of all time, and with Angel, is Liberty or Death, baby. Raw Sewage. Me and Veronica versus Lizzie Borden and Angel. I mean, that match was just outrageous. The premise was beyond disgusting. It had people once again thinking XPW is the worst, most horrific in the world.
Yeah. If anything's going to do it, it's that. A Raw Sewage match.
There was other controversy on that show, other amazing matches on that show. That was my favorite. I mean, the 30-foot ship bomb, man, at Pico Rivera, in under the star-filled sky, where I always say it was like reverse hyperspeed, because you see the stars go away instead of towards you, and you watch it. It's a 2-second. You jump off, and a second and a half later, we're hitting tables. But to us, as we're floating through the sky, and not like it felt like an hour, but it felt like probably 6 or 7 seconds, and it felt long enough that we thought we were going to miss the table. And just at that moment where we squeeze each other, like, oh my God, we may die. Boom, hit the table, and it all went. And then I just remember going backstage at that show, and the sewage mixture was making me puke, and I was puking backstage. And then the dirt sheets reported that we used real sewage, which was even better, because once again, what a scumbag Rob Black is for using real sewage. And it's like, we always worked people. We always worked. We worked the fans. We worked the media. We were good at what we did of making. You brought up reality before, of making you think that we were doing real when it was a show, man. Well,
there you go, right there. Because we are actually doing real things. We're coming off Heatwave, of course, the scaffold match. So just because we were working in some capacity doesn't mean we weren't real in others. So because we were so real in others, there you go. We heightened that suspension of disbelief. We now have the luxury to pull off a work because of this. It's coming from someone that, in a weird way, we were credible for believing. We were honest and credible.
Here's where I have fun with smoke and mirrors and blowing your mind, but it's going to be kind of, once again, smoke and mirrors and me blowing your mind, because Kaos and I really did brand ourselves.
Yeah, we're going to get into that. I was going to get into that here. But yeah, please.
But yet, neither Kaos and I have brands to this day. Huh?
Yeah.
What?
Oh, wow. Wow. That's news to a lot of us, by the way. You can't think
we branded ourselves.
Yeah.
Mine's just healed up, and his is covered with a tattoo, but it's just
Yeah, no, that was okay, because I was gonna say, no, that was, I remember that moment, man, like watching on TV. I wasn't there in the office, or maybe it was after Rivera and I left one night, or whatever. Who knows?
We did that at my house.
Oh, that was at your house. Okay. I thought, that's right. Okay. So I just
and then Webb made it the magic moment by putting on the music, like the music over it. Just the whole you're my inspiration. Right. Like Webb always found a way to change the mood in the right way, to add a levity or add a gravitas or add or break the tension in a clever way, and
keep the story going, and don't soften it up in any way or water it down. Totally. And that was, we'll hopefully have him on in the future. But
so
Kevin
real
and
quick, and saying his name, and just because I did watch your interview with Kevin, and when you guys talked about the end of XPW and Kevin bringing up like, oh, he forgot that he had to edit the shows at the end of the season because he forgot that Webb left. Let me be honest and say the end of XPW was when Webb left the company. Like, we can see all the things because XPW still went on for probably 6 months or more after Webb, but that was the end. When Webb left,
was the end.
The show died, and that's the reality that doesn't get talked about too much.
Very true, because and I can tell you firsthand, doing the TV shows, calling the matches every single week. And then the very next week, when it was everybody was basically taking turns. It was Tom, it was Kevin, Rob was doing a little bit of it too, and some of the editors that they had. I just remember going in there like, oh my goodness, they just don't know how to do this. Webb had his experience as far as taking classes, editing, and all this, but there you have this editor who is a professional wrestler. And say what you want about Webb. Webb was push buttons, right? And personally, but he was cool. He was pushing buttons. He was cool. He was pushing buttons. So this is a guy who, because of this personality that Webb had, you have to know him to know what I'm talking about. But when you have this personality the way he had, and had a wrestling mind, and had this experience in media, so this is your perfect editor for a wrestling television show. You could have gotten all these experts that have had this training in video equipment and all this in editing, and you could have had this guy that was a great wrestler, but you really had this guy that was both. You had this guy that could know how to put a television from a technical standpoint together from the mind of a pretty damn good psychological professional wrestler. He had a great wrestling mind. And this is the guy that was putting our television show together.
The master of Boom Shoe.
Yeah, there you go. So this was the guy that a lot of people, like you say, forget, but being there week after week, going into the edit bay with him, and then okay, this is the match we're going to call. This is what was going on. Oh, maybe we can slide this in there. We can do this. We can do this, that, and the other. And then knowing not only wrestling wise what worked, but let's start the match with 10 seconds going in. Let's fade in because that would make sense for this character, this storyline. Little things like that. Every single week were being played out in that booth to, like, again, make it look cool editing wise, professional, but also making sense for a professional wrestling. You basically had one guy that could equal like a team of Hollywood writers and wrestling people collaborating all at once, but it was all happening inside of his own head. And again, when you take a guy like that away, of course the television product's going to suffer. And damn, it really did, But nonetheless, enough about Webb. Hopefully one day we can have him on here. But let's go into now Smiley.
He's got an agent. It may be hard to get in touch with him.
Oh, no way. Okay, all right. So we'll see what
I think his agent Manny Peoples.
Okay.
He's tough to negotiate with.
People's Productions. I remember that company. So I'll try to get in touch with them, or have our people here get in touch with them. Our Spanish speaking, I know they're, but nonetheless, let's fast forward a little bit, Smiley. Let's go into so you're in XPW. You guys are totally established now as the Enterprise, and we were
the hottest thing in indie, like we were the hottest thing in wrestling. Like we were just cool. Yeah. There was a cool factor. Chaos was a stud. I was just an obnoxious loudmouth with an eclectic style, and then Veronica was hot, cool, and then was showing that she can do stuff physically as well. Like she had brains and beauty, and then
I agree.
And then supplementary TJ Rush, Rosano, all of it. We had a cool factor, and we did some cool stuff.
So leading up to
now I'm not so cool.
Come on now. Leading up to where we're at now in XPW, but leading up to when, of course, going back to when you got to XPW, you were quite the jack of all trades, and you I could say, knowing you personally, you definitely a hustle, man, and you put a lot of work into getting stuff done and to creating new avenues for yourself. So now being in WWE, coming out of Denver, XPW, and all the things, the facets you were going into, are you still involved with, and if so, how is the business with your balloon and flower shop?
Oh man. Unfortunately, like I got crushed in the recession of 2008, man. Like I couldn't hold up. I made the dumb move of trying to franchise, going into having some other people use the GQ balloon concept, and they completely bastardized the brand. They ruined my reputation, and in the end, I signed a terrible contract where I signed over rights without even realizing. It was just a travesty. It could have been the worst business deal of my entire life.
Right. Okay. So if those of you have no freaking clue what we're talking about now, this was a work. So we were talking about in the storyline of the Enterprise, you became a businessman and went outside, and we found somewhere in the San Fernando Valley, the strip mall, GQ flower and balloons.
Yeah, it was my favorite. I used to drive to work from Woodland Hills to North Hollywood, and every day on Ventura Boulevard, I'd pass a couple of blocks from my house this place called GQ Balloons. And
what corner was that on, by the way? What corner was that on? Do you remember? Like Winnetka or Tampa?
Not Winnetka, so it's going to be past Reseda. So I'm going to say like between Reseda and Tampa, and I'm not going to remember the side street. It wasn't the major. It was one of the in-betweens, but it's between that. Okay. GQ balloon. I mean, I remember the way the driveway of the whole strip mall went, and I was like, we got to use it. It was just so ridiculous that it was there.
So funny, man.
So Damage Inc. I lose to Webb in a world championship match, and that I had no business being in, and that was part of the storyline. That how is GQ? I qualified by winning a battle royal by cheating, by being sneaky, and once again I was. Kaos thought he should be getting that opportunity as well, because why would I be going for the championship at that point? Mm-hmm. And this was also when Ready to Rumble was or it was post Ready to Rumble. Me and Webb, years later, but me and Webb had a thing with Ready to Rumble. That's what it was, where I said that in his Boonshoe outfit, he looked like Jimmy King. So there was this whole Ready to Rumble thing, and I would crown you during the match. But then afterwards, he freaking, the whole thing was he put me in a submission, made me pass out. And when passed out, he shaved my head. And when doing the shave, we did the bald man horseshoe. We kept the sides and only had the crown. So the whole concept on storyline was I was so embarrassed and humiliated by my loss and what he did to my hair that I had to retire from professional wrestling to protect my reputation. And in doing so, I found a side business and I was opening up GQ balloons.
I love that. If you know the San Fernando Valley, there's all sorts of little strip malls everywhere, and there's balloon and flower shops everywhere, and there's one up in Northridge I just saw called GP Flowers and Balloons, and I was like, it always reminds me of GQ Flower and Balloons. And then look, if you watch the product, that looks like it could be totally believable.
Legit. Absolutely.
Right. Especially if you're not in SoCal, especially if you don't if you're watching from Nebraska or something. I don't know. But
the only thing not legit, and I don't know what fans were looking at, and if it's just because I was on the inside, is that we never ever actually went into the store ever.
I remember that. And
I always came from standing in front of the door where it would maybe close a half inch as I walked away.
Yeah. I remember one episode you were coming home from a hard night's work over at GQ Flowers and Balloons, or you were just leaving the office, you pretended like you were just closing the door, but it was every night you would leave the shop, you were holding flowers and balloons. You just work there. You just sell them. That doesn't mean you always have to have the products with you.
Well, I was also, remember, I was struggling in my biz. I was doing my own deliveries, Chris.
Oh, geez. Yeah, but no, this was one episode where you were just going home, but you had your product with you.
Until the one time I was going home, and this was the days that because of being embarrassed because of my hair, I was wearing a wig at the time. And I ran into Supreme.
Yeah. Okay. We're gonna talk about it for sure.
And that was one of the scariest promos I ever had to shoot because he beat the ever loving crap out of me.
Yeah, I know, man. If you were in a program with Lester, you were in a fucking program with Lester, Supreme, not Lester.
And not only was I worried that Supreme was going to hurt me because of the way he did stuff, but remember, I lit the dude on fire and put him in a hospital, so I was terrified of retribution.
Totally. And yeah, he let's get into that, because I was going to talk to you a little bit about him, and we talked with Kevin, and in the last couple months, there's been a renewed interest in XPW. Unfortunately, part of the reason is because of Supreme's passing, and he and of course Dark Side of the Ring, New Jack, all this stuff. So there's just things have been peaking a little bit online, and that's. Can you elaborate on that story and any other memories of Supreme?
I mean, so Supreme was scary. Like he was stiff, and like you were worried. Well, you were worried he was going to beat the heck out of you. Like that was straight up it. And once again, me having been involved in the storyline where we lit him on fire, where he accidentally was lit on fire, and it was a dangerous accident that put him in the hospital.
Again, folks, real.
So, like. There was always this weird. I always had this weird energy. Now, Supreme was always respectful, kind, absolutely embraced me as a brother and part of the family. But there was always for me this like a bit of respect, a bit of intimidation, and a bit of tension, because it was always like, ugh, this is just not going to go well for me throughout like my experience in the ring with him. And nothing horrible, and never took liberties or did anything dangerous. And when you work with him, it was fine. And he's a consummate professional that did what he was supposed to do in the best possible ways. But the character became so real and so believable that I absolutely bought into it, and I was terrified of the guy.
Yeah, no, and that was the case. I remember one night there was a little levity. Like you never saw him as Lester. Even like he was just like, you felt like you were always around Supreme. And I remember one night going to the office, and he had a job. I forget what he was working at. I forget what he was doing, but he had this like button up polo shirt on. And I was just like, what? I've never seen dress normal. Like, right. And he said, I was like, wow, man, like what's with the duds, dude? And he looked at me like, what do you mean? Like all getting all intimidated. And I just said, oh man, I just try to play cool, like it's just not Supreme, man. And then that broke all the tension. He was laughing, I was laughing, and also legitimately I was paying respect to the believability of that character of Supreme. Because even coming into the office, kayfabe, all that, of course we all know each other, this and that. But even in that little moment, I was like taken out of fan mode for a second. The guy who's calling the matches, knowing these guys, and I just remember thinking like, that's so powerful. That his character is kind of doing that to us backstage for television production.
A Supreme memory that I will never forget was XPW Asylum, the training school in the warehouse. And it was, and the lesson was Supreme teaching them how to gig. And he cuts the blade and just starts fucking slicing himself. It's like, here's one across the arm. It's no big deal. You just take it and go.
Oh, man.
No big deal. You just whoop, and you're just like, and I just remember it's like, what am I watching right now? But like, and he would just so calm, so cool, like no sweat off his back. And just like, what? That's what you're going to have to do. Right. It was just like, this dude's hardcore. He's the king of the death match. He's awesome. The real deal. I just also remember, like, man, I mean, the crazy side of the memories is after having the incident, of Scene of the Crime and him going up on, at Rapture, where he went up on fire.
Yeah, right. That was Rapture. Yeah.
Yeah. Scene of the Crime was Giant Show with the run-in, but yeah, at Rapture when we had the fire incident, the crazy reality of that a couple of days later when we had to go do pre-tapes for TV, had to do skits for TV that week, I had to go on TV and cut a promo how proud I was to burn a guy. Like, right. That's the other side of what we do, of the dynamic that you don't think about, because especially being such a outwardly, dynamically obnoxious character that, there's no remorse, there's no regret, and in fact, there's an intent and a purpose for what happened. And I remember Kane, like, he probably doesn't remember and would neglect, like, would probably reject the premise of this, but like, Kano was terrified of me at shows after that, like as a little kid. Like,
yeah, right, little kid, right.
Right. I'm not like not an adult or a teenager, like, but just when he was young at those XPW shows post the fire, like, no, there was an uncomfortable nature. I'm the dude who lit his dad on fire, man. Like,
that's crazy.
And I remember it making me feel bad though when I would do these promos on TV, and I gotta say I loved the promo, but like I'd sit and then have like that feeling after of, what a scumbag I am, like doing
But
this.
there you go, man. That was right. But you know, it was consensual. He Supreme knew you were doing that and all this. So, but at the end of the day, that was. But I know that feeling when things get a little bit real. Then you have to play. Then you have to tease it into the show, not to the level of giving putting someone on fire. But I remember, like, for example, when Rivera left.
One
he had a falling. Well, Rivera had a falling out with Rob, and it was pretty. It kind of sucked, right? And but I remember I didn't have no heat with him. I was sad to see him go and all that. But I remember, as shitty as that altercation was, and the way he left or took off, and then the very next week, it was like I remember there were certain things that I was saying how horrible Rivera was and all this, and it was like, yes, I understand. I would say that. But I remember kind of like you said, man, I had that little bit of a cringe factor when I was going through that. But it's one of those things like, the show must go on. We got to do what we can. And then a little bit of just kind of giving back to the business. If shit happens, we'll take that shit and give it back to the business, So I would expect someone to do that if it was reverse, if Rivera stayed and I'd left, or something like that. But yeah, no, Supreme, we dearly missed, and all our thoughts and prayers go out to Kano, his wife, his whole entire family, and want to just tell the fans that have been writing me specifically about Supreme, that's what we're doing here. We're sharing some memories and paying tribute to one of the great legends as far as hardcore wrestling goes in the world. And believe me, when myself and for you, Smiley, when the two of us here fans talk about this stuff, we're talking about it as if we would talk about it if we weren't on the computer screen right now. This is something that is totally 100% true about this guy. He was kind of like the Undertaker of the XPW locker room in many respects. We talked last week with Kevin, and because again, this guy's professionalism, this believability, and talk about a guy who was like, the homegrown stars, non-ECW guys that came over, that was just all in and believed in this. And he was XPW in many ways. He was kind of like the poster boy for this company. Yeah. And you couldn't have a show without him. And we can get into that too. Speaking of having a show without Rob Black, we kind of got into that a little bit before with something was just missing, something wasn't there. And I think a lot of that stuff that was missing attributed to Rob. And I'm going to go into that a little bit with WSX, because I think a little bit of that could have been captured had we had Supreme on Wrestling Society X. I remember he was there at the tapings and we were talking and it's like, oh man, well, hey, season 2. Let's hope you get on season 2, and you should be on here. I remember having that conversation with him. Before we get into WSX, though, Smiley, let's switch gears. Let's go. We're going to be talking about the true expansion now of XPW. Okay, we're already done shows at the Sports Arena, the Grand Olympic Auditorium, worldwide DVD distributions, and of course a nationally syndicated television show. Now. And kind of, let's say, going off of what Heatwave resembled, we now are going to the East Coast. Let me get your thoughts right now on the expansion, the East Coast expansion, not only to the East Coast, but specifically to the old ECW Arena / Viking Hall / Bingo Hall, right around the corner from Tony Luke's, the big sponsor for XPW at the time, Tony Luke's Philly Cheesesteak.
I posted a story on my Facebook this week. Apparently, Tony Luke's in big heat for tax evasion of millions and millions of dollars. Story came out this week.
I actually ran into somebody recently from Philadelphia. We were talking food, and he was saying Tony Luke's. I didn't know about that, but he was saying Tony Luke's isn't the same. They used to be this little mom and pop. Now they
franchise because there's a location in Brooklyn and yeah.
So he was telling me like, no, man, that used to be great. And I was telling him, well, this was back in like early 2000s. He goes, oh yeah, dude, that was the shit back then. But now they've turned into corporate like, But anyway, I didn't know about this either, Smiley.
So the East Coast expansion was interesting because it was the right move and it was the wrong move. So it was the right move executed very poorly because Rob got very ahead of himself and big on the we'll call it arrogance for now. But once again, we were the XPW Styles. We were the renegades of wrestling. We were the bad boys. We made crazy accusations or defenses and this and that. So when we made Hostile Takeover, resounding success. First show in Philly, the lead up, the 4-week television leading up, No Sleep Till Philly. Like all that stuff was awesome. First show was incredible, sold out, amazing atmosphere, a new vibe, a new direction for the company. Shane Douglas is in. We're bringing in some of the old awesome wrestlers from ECW. We're putting on better matches. All these things are great things until every independent in Philadelphia ganged up against us, and Rob went with the "fuck you, everyone! I'm buying the arena," which was the biggest waste of money and just, I mean, it definitely hurt the company. Aside from that, I am a firm believer that it was the XPW East Coast Philly wrestling war that led to all of the stuff with parent company Xtreme being raided and like the stakeouts by the feds and the whole plan. Like this was all I don't know for 100%, but believe it was crazy wrestling fans who kept trying to give tips, fake tips, leads, this, that, or the other to try to bust Rob Black for anything possible. So I think Rob got ahead of himself. The arrogance got a little big. And buying the arena was the dumbest thing ever. If we would have gone there every other month and not abandoned home and this and that, we would have had another, like we would have kept going. But by trying to be the kings of the East Coast, like I said, CZW and Ring of Honor, who hated each other, came together to like work against us. And every fed that generally were always against each other locally in that area and territory came together to say, screw you guys, we want you out. And you know what? They beat us. Like that's the sad, unfortunate, we lost that war and it was the beginning of the end. It led to the stuff of Webb eventually leaving. It led to me and Kaos and Veronica being disgruntled. It led to it was just the beginning of the end. Things were getting different. Rob was at that point, I'll say, was in a different mindset. For me and Kaos, we didn't like the fact that it was the Shane Douglas show. We went from being the best act on TV, or one of the best acts on TV, to all of a sudden we weren't on TV doing skits anymore between the matches and stuff. And we always felt it was Shane holding us down at that point, and whether it was or it wasn't, I've grown. Like I doesn't matter at this point in life, but like there was definitely years of my life, where me and Kaos thought that Shane was holding us down at that phase and just didn't want us to get ahead. And like part of that comes out like in my rap in Philly when we had the title defense, the party where I come out rapping, and there's lines in there where it's like, you can't have a franchise without your superstar. Without the superstar, you ain't got no franchise. So.
So this was at a time when, like you said, when the first show we had, 2002, Hostile Takeover, it felt powerful. It felt like there was a lot of momentum. Yeah, it was powerful. It was a lot of momentum, and then there was just this different fan base from the East Coast. And I thought it was so awesome being there and seeing these different fans see us live for the first time. Genuinely excited. Remember now, this was at a time, unlike the people that are talking to me now about, that was cool, the whole Heatwave incident that you guys did. This was at a time where ECW versus XPW. So when you had, even though ECW had been gone not too long, though, they hadn't been gone too long, yet we're still at the arena, yet they're still interested and a little bit hungry for our product. Now, at that time, so going to the ECW Viking Hall Arena, your thoughts on at that time, but even before that, because like you said, when it's an interesting point you bring up with Shane Douglas and all these guys that were coming in, and they would just do the classic wrestling promo on camera. And then we go to a match. This is the later days of XPW. I felt like at that time, all the things we're talking about, how what made XPW interesting, even though you could look at it tongue in cheek, it's a low rent, all this stuff, but embrace it. Like Kevin was saying, when we started doing this, okay, we got these big names. They're doing just regular wrestling promos though. And it felt like just another wrestling show at that time.
Absolutely.
It just felt like a watered down version
of what it was.
And a little bit of our own character was totally sucked out because we had these big names. Now, I'm not knocking the big names, but I want to get your thoughts on just XPW throughout its history, bringing in the outside talent, what that meant for the local guys, what that meant to the local fans, specifically on the West Coast.
So it was always important to bring the big names in, and they obviously had an important impact on what XPW was, became, and where it went. So, like, I don't think you would ever have what XPW was if you didn't have the ECW names, if you didn't have Chris Candido on a box cover, if you didn't have Terry Funk and Sabu, if you didn't have Big Dick Dudley, if you didn't have Shane Douglas, like it's Sandman, it wouldn't have become what it was. But yes, what ended up happening at that, especially in that end era, from that point of once we went to Philly on, was the focus on the names to get bigger became at the expense of the local homegrown stars, where it wasn't these names were elevating our stars to the next level of their career. It was really, they were replacing the homegrown stars. And I think for some of us, and I can't speak for everyone, but I know I can speak for myself. I feel like my memory is correct that I can speak for Kaos, but like we felt we were getting the shaft. Like here you had guys coming in, and I'll use Xpac as an example because of where it went when, Xpac was coming in, was obviously getting paid a lot more money than we were. He didn't care about the company. It wasn't that he was trying to make XPW bigger, better, and take it to the next level of growth and expansion. He was coming in for a payday and to go lead. So when Kaos was supposed to go drop the television title to Xpac, at X Park in LA, this was the end. Like this was where me and Rob and we were all getting into our issue of, what are you doing? What's the direction of this place going? Or where's the direction that you're going? Because we don't really like where it's going. And guess what? It's your company and you have the right to do anything you want. But if this is what you're doing, then maybe it's not a place where we want to be a part of anymore. And in theory, Kaos and I weren't a part of that last show in history. So,
Right. That's what we were talking about with Kevin, trying to think of like the guys that were, not for you, of course, because you came later, but just trying to think of like the only handful of guys
who lasted, right? Because you would expect that Kaos was beginning to end. Technically, I mean, he pretty much was. I think he missed one show because of the way it worked, but because we were in Pittsburgh, and then there was the one, So, but I just that was it. But that, like, there's the fun story. I mean, me, Kaos, and Xpac almost got in a brawl backstage at that show. Like
I remember that. Yeah.
That was wild, and it's funny because I see Pac now and we talk about it, and like he's awesome. The guy's great, but his head was in a very, very, very different space back then. And being in the position that we were in, it was frustrating. We were trying to take our careers up a level. We wanted to make the money. We wanted to have the fame. We wanted to be seen as top level people, and not just the outcast indie guys or the renegade XPW guys that'll never have any career or anything out. Like, no, we wanted to be something major and be something special. And we felt that Rob was going in a different direction, and it was time.
Totally. Let me ask you. Let's fast forward now. We're going to be talking because kind of covering the original days of XPW. Before though we get to that, I want to talk about what we kind of did in between. A little show called Wrestling Society X, and this was on MTV. This lasted one season, and a lot of people that were involved with XPW were involved with Wrestling Society X, and arguably, I think Rob Black stated at one time, like, that's basically what WSX was XPW. Even though we had talent from other factions, you had, of course, Tyler Black / Seth Rollins. You had guys like Jack Evans, you had guys, all sorts of guys. And of course, a lot of local guys that weren't really a part of XPW, like Human Tornado. Scorpio Sky did a couple, I think, matches with XPW. But anyway, Wrestling Society X was the brainchild of Kevin Kleinrock once again. And this was at a time when he was working at Big Vision Entertainment. I ended up working for Big Vision Entertainment, and that's when you and I kind of rekindled and saw each other quite a bit and became friends. And you were living, I think, at a small window. You were living in Woodland Hills at the like you moved to Woodland Hills right before I moved out of Woodland Hills to move to downtown LA. But yeah, so we kind of retouched base and hung out and all this stuff. And so that was kind of an interesting time because we ended up doing a reunion show for XPW a couple years later, XPW's Cold Day in Hell, and then XPW X, Roman numeral XPW 10. And 10th year anniversary. But Wrestling Society X, when you found out that this was going to happen, when you found out the concept of the show, the magnitude of the network we were going to go on, what did this mean to you? How did you get involved? And I mean, it was kind of like, again, like we're already talking, we already knew Kevin. He already knew who he was dealing with a lot of us. And it was kind of a safe place to go as far as, okay, I can hire this guy as a ref, this guy as an announcer, this guy as a wrestler, or mic piece, whatever. What was your involvement with XPW? Of course, you were the ring announcer. How did you become the ring announcer? Is that what you wanted to do? Did you want to step it up a notch? I think if correct me if I'm wrong, but as you explained this, I think you had a lead up to be something else. If I remember, your character was starting to evolve actually on that show.
Yeah, I mean, so there was a lot in that, and I always feel like as being part of the Big Vision crew too, I was always pitching a lot of big ideas and crazy ideas too to Houston and trying to create the next big products as well and try to expand my role in wrestling and what I offer the industry. And I remember there was a period when Kevin told me they were making the pitch that I felt kind of, I remember there was one period where I felt kind of like, oh man, is he taking stuff that like I gave to him like recently? Like I had talked about an idea of and it was different. And then I remember him telling me he always had this thing because remember Wrestling Society X was always going to be like this rancid wrestling federation to start with was what was Kevin's original concept was. But like from the very beginning that it was becoming something real, I feel like I was just always working with Kevin and talking with Kevin on ideas and executions and stuff. I remember having meetings with him where we sat and we came up with crazy, the FMW style things that we could do on a show because MTV was interested in crazy stuff, what ideas we have. And I remember you talk about going to the sports arena for location. I remember going with Kevin in Houston for the locations, searches and scouts for that show, and then given the ideas of guys should come from different entrances and not just the traditional entranceway, and we should find different ways where each person has their unique thing. So like, I always felt like I was a contributor to the concept and creative of WSX. So in terms of what was my involvement. So then on the talent aspect, Kevin brought me in as the ring announcer, and then which also became the host of the supplementary show, for WS Extra on .com. And I think at that point there was a discussion. I think I was trying to pursue a career of becoming more legitimate, more mainstream, and I figured trying to be more of the ring announcer host was better for my career than being a character on the show. As at that point, living in California and trying to get mainstream gigs, I just felt that I needed more resume stuff that wasn't just me wrestling or being my wrestling character. So like, it was always this let's work and do it. So he always, I mean, the crazy thing on the announcer story was originally I was going to be the full Clockwork Orange, crazy Carnival Barker style person. And at that pilot, I was walking to the ring to start the pilot wearing my crazy striped pants on my Rob Black spring-loaded shoes, like those big old boots that had like freaking 6-inch springs on the bottom or whatever they were. Right. And I had my cane and all this, and I'm bouncing over to the to the warehouse to get ready to start. And the MTV execs see me, they stop and they go over and they talk to whether it was Rick or Roberto or Houston, whoever it was. And those guys come over and talk to me and they're like, Yeah, MTV doesn't want you to dress like that, and they want you to just kind of be more like a Joe Rogan in jeans and a black, and a black button down. And I remember throwing a temper tantrum. Like I threw my bags and gear, fuck them and this and that. And I won't lie, I look back now and I was like, I was a little baby. I was like, I was definitely a little baby. And I go and I do what they asked for, and I gave them what they asked for. But then I think the big rib is Kevin always came back to me that after the pilot, after seeing the pilot and seeing how you were, they understood the concept and they decided they wanted you to be that character again. And then Kevin was like, but instead of just switching on the fly from the pilot to this, now we got to slowly make it happen and we'll create a story for you to transition. But there's that piece of me that thinks it was the MTV almost giving me the FU and ribbing me and being like, yeah, go back and dress like that, you dumb shit. Let's see how that helps you out. Like, wow. In the end, joke's on me. We got canceled. So like there's that piece. But like I threw a temper tantrum like when it came to that. But WSX was awesome, and hosting the show was awesome, and losing my voice was crazy. And
remember that, man.
And going to the Beverly Hills doctor on Rodeo Drive that does the stuff for the American Idol kids, and rolling in once again in my outrageous costume and Clockwork Orange face paint and Rodeo Drive to go get a shot of cortisone in my ass cheek and liquid adrenaline dropped on my vocal cords. I mean, what an incredible experience.
No, it was short-lived, but it was quite the experience.
We all thought it was going to launch us to the next level. I mean, come on, we went to some red carpets together after that, trying to spark us up to the next level and stuff. Like, it did nothing for like any of us. Yes, Tyler Black became very successful as Seth Rollins, and at the time, Matt Classic went on and had a nice little run. But in all reality, that run was set to be before WSX, so he didn't get it because of it. And like the only Evan Bourne and Tyler Black came out of it like really to the next level. Everyone else was just continuously doing what they had always been doing, and that's just grinding on the rest of the circuit.
That's true, and there was a lot of promise that went into that, and there was a lot of confidence in the production and the network, and in Houston too, and Big Vision Entertainment. But who knows with television, and that's just another story. But it's there.
You talked about the energy that it was missing and how it was essentially the XPW vibe, but without Rob, because it was that next version of XPW without Rob's influence. And I think at that point, like Rob was untouchable. Like there was an air of he's too dangerous now. He's too controversial. He's fresh out of prison. Right. He had the federal raid. We don't want to touch it. Maybe we can't get product. And I mean, in the end, it's funny because WSX was this cool product, and I know if the tables were turned and I was in Rob's shoes in that, I would have felt pretty hurt watching that product. Yeah, I would have enjoyed it, but still, it would have broken me a little bit going like, this is my crew doing my stuff, and it's not me.
Yeah, I remember you couldn't help thinking about it at the time too. When we were performing. And there was this little, maybe like an unease, kind of like maybe somewhat like that same feeling that you're talking about earlier with the fire with Supreme, or when Rivera left and then tell him, how bad he was. And there was there was something there that resembled that, and, but we were all doing a job, and that was just the way wrestling works, but now, you're talking about memories of Supreme earlier, talking about, of course, let's go to,
sorry, now I'm just thinking of an old memory that crossed my mind because Rob came in, and then a random one. You remember when Playboy Buddy Rose came to the office wanting to get in a fight with Rob?
I remember, I wasn't there, but I remember hearing about that. And
oh gosh,
I remember so bummed after he left, like, oh no, he's gone. Playboy Buddy Rose is gone.
What a place,
man. Yeah, I could, boy, those two just were two opposites, right? Rose from the old school, and I mean, it almost like he didn't fit in like when he would interview Steve Rosano on the Rose Garden. And I remember when they were interviewing each other, it was just like, it was cool, but it was like, he doesn't realize where he's at in Playboy Buddy Rose. This is XPW. He's just doing this old school 80s interview. And I remember thinking, like, it was like oil and water, like watching Playboy Buddy Rose. I love that he was there. It was like awesome, but it was like it didn't fit. It was like oil and water. Like, you're doing this old school 80s interview, but do you realize you're in an XPW ring right now? You know.
Can Louis Anderson play Playboy Buddy Rose in the XPW movie?
I don't know who else could. I don't know who else could.
Who plays Rob and who plays Kevin in the XPW movie?
That's a good question. I'm gonna see if my producer can help me out on that one. But that's got to be a lot of thought put into that. But
I think that's got to be the new question for everyone: who plays who in the XPW movie?
Totally. Who made who plays who? But memories of talk about around that time, a little after WSX, we did a tribute show, and you were, you talked about when you were in Colorado and you didn't like, or growing up, you didn't like indie because it was the fake Rick Rude, it was the fake Demolition, and what about like fake Jimmy Harts? Have you ever seen those around when the Mouth of the South? I remember I gave you that name, the Mouth of the South. I said put West on there, Southwest. There you go. But you were Jimmy Hart, and we had a very cool.
The Dynamite D Memorial Show.
Yeah, very cool 80s tribute. And I went out as with the Howard Finkel voice. I was called the Stink, not the Fink. Yeah. But everybody dressed up as an 80s wrestler. Danny Ramirez was Bobby Heenan. It was just a lot of fun. Because, of course, Dynamite D, his character was Mr. 80s Dynamite D, and he would always come out every show as a different 80s wrestler. So we all played different 80s wrestlers. So that was a fun show, and I remember seeing you at that show, Smiley. And, of course, if anyone's going to play this up and do it right, you were one of those guys, and you were Jimmy Hart, Mouth of the Southwest, I
remember when I got to meet Jimmy and I showed him the picture of me as him and stuff. Absolutely pulled it out of my phone. I was like, I did a show dressed as you and all that. And he was like, oh, that's very just cool,
great. That's awesome, man. That's awesome. Well, it's cool. The
funny thing about those shows, the Dynamite D tribute shows, the two of them that I did, my pants were always ripped off at those shows.
Well, that's Jimmy Hart, man.
As Jimmy Hart, I ended up with my red underwear and all that, and then I was Brother Love the following year, and I had a wardrobe malfunction that, in the process of my pants being ripped off, revealing my red underwear, Oso Loco, playing the American Dream, got a hold of my underwear on the pull of the breakaway pants and ripped everything off my body.
Oh, dang, man.
There's a hysterical clip online, GQ Money Wardrobe Malfunction, where it's where I censor it with the picture of my head, and it's just ridiculous.
Well, that, speaking of the tribute, I mean, that show was, and then we had, of course, the Dynamite D Battle Royal tribute at XPW Cold Day in Hell, and this was done back in 2008. XPW had a reunion show. Again, Rob Black wasn't involved in it. But, and that's again, a lot of people didn't like that. And there was something, I will say, there was something missing because of that. But we had Big Vision Entertainment behind it. Kevin was involved. And this was a pretty big deal at the time because we drew pretty well. There was definitely still some interest. And it was a little bit of a continuation, too, in a weird way, of WSX. It came like a year later. And, because you guys had guys like Vampiro came in, and you got, that continuing from WSX as well, and XPW. Yep. But let's go back to your match. Again, as far as creatively, I think it was definitely the most creative thing on the show, which was you, Angel. And then you, at the time, I remember you were getting into magic. You were doing stuff with the infomercials. The ab stuff and all that, and you were all into that at that time, and you were actually dabbling into magic. I remember big time. I remember you come in the office, you had your little book and your tricks. Oh, let's try this one out. Okay, let's oh cool, man, or whatever. But you definitely incorporated that into the show, and you definitely fooled everybody. People in production, of course, the fans, people. We didn't announce that show live, but I remember watching on the monitor. Like, I didn't know what the whole angle was going to be. So I was like, saw it with raw eyes, if you will, and it was. I remember the feel like, oh, I didn't see that. Oh, that was awesome, and and all this stuff. But what did that show mean to you? What did your part? Please talk about the whole your match, your gimmick, and all that, and what happened. But also tell me what was that vibe like? What would XPW Cold Day in Hell? And of course, a year after that, 2009 was XPW Roman numeral 10, which was the 10-year anniversary. Tell me what that whole era was to you, and when your involvement in it.
Loved Cold Day in Hell. I mean, that was the bringing it back, and it was a big show, and it sold well. And Mike Hartsfield worked his butt off to market that.
Sorry. I was going to mention him later, but I might as well mention him now. Yes, Mike Hartsfield. That guy was a workhorse, and he made that happen. So we're talking about Rob, talking about Kevin, Houston, Big Vision. We cannot leave you, Mike Tickle Hartsfield, out of this.
For that show, 100%, like Mike always worked hard. For that show, he made that a tremendous success, and he made it exciting, and there was a buzz, and everyone, the team worked hard to make it. But like, once again, he took pride and ownership of this as a project that he's trying to make successful. And I thought he did a tremendous job. I probably never said that to him. There could even be some lingering tension and heat from a relay, but like, all credit.
I don't think so.
He killed it. It was incredible. And I knew, once again, with Angel, we wanted to do something interesting, exciting, and how are we going to steal the show with so many big, interesting things on it. And as you said, I was getting into magic. I've always, throughout my career in wrestling, had some magician friends who I've always used as a consultant in a lot of my ideas. So for my era at XPW, Magic Eric was my guy. Eric Trout, the Magic of Eric Trout.
I remember that. Yeah.
And we discussed what we can do, and he gave me a couple of ideas to try to execute. And we got to do it. I mean, the moment, there's so much depth to that whole match, and even the lead up of the storyline. Because even as we were building the online promotion and doing the videos and the teasers in the months leading up to sell tickets, the hype between me and Angel was big. And then a week before the show, I put out a video that I tore my calf and was pulling from the match. And I did makeup on my leg to make it look like I had this horrible tear and hematoma and bruising and sweat and all this stuff, and put out a video that I was injured and couldn't do the match, which led to the week later at the match, me coming out, cutting the promo saying, I'm sorry I can't wrestle. It was legitimately Angel's birthday on that show.
Yeah.
So Angel, because I'm a good guy, and although we can't do what we always did, and that's steal the show, I wanted to show some respect to you for what you've been to my career and give you some birthday gifts. Happy birthday. And I leave the stage as the stage hands put all the gifts on the stage. So Angel comes out and he's opening the presents, and there's random stuff. There was the Brokeback Mountain joke of a pillow, and then he pulls out the ab rocket. You talked about me being on the infomercial at the time. I was on a very successful infomercial. I was seen all over it. And in fact, at that show, like 20 people that were part of like my ab rocket group had bought tickets and came to go support me at that show.
Cool,
man. Really cool and special and neat. And like, in fact, one of the actually, no, that's another crew. That was the video game crew brought the giant head of me. That show meant a lot to me, because I was also at the time working on WWE video games. I was working on the SmackDown vs. Raw.
And incidentally, I was working with you on those WWE video games. That was a lot of fun too, man. Yeah,
amazing. And doing the motion capture. And some of my friends from that studio came to that show to support me, and one of which brought a giant 5 foot head of mine, of just my face on a stick. And it was, I really feel like it was the beginning of big heads in the audience at any sports show.
Yeah, that was it.
It was this. So the guy who made that is, I don't know how that works. Never mind. I'm not going to say his name. He's a famous, not a tagger, but they do the sticker tags, like where they do like the murals and the logos. Right. So I won't say his name, but Smog City is the vibe, and they came and represented with that sign, with the giant head. And so this show is incredible. Once again, so now we got to do some magic. So Angel's opening the presents, and he gets to the last present, which is a big giant box, and he opens it, and boom! Not just a fireball, but legit an explosion. There was fire, there was sparks, it was wild. and then I jump out of the box in my wrestling gear, ready to wrestle. The
and
funny
you had
thing
already
is,
left. You had already left, so we weren't expecting you coming in. Yeah,
Yep.
so
there was no reason to know. I won't say how I did the trick and all that, but yes, there was no reason to believe that you would ever see me again. I had left the stage, other side, blah, 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 blah. The funny thing when you go watch it back on playback, in my haste, in my hurry to take off the clothes and do my change of the gear to get in position for the reveal, I forgot to take the tank top off that I was wearing. So when I come out of the box, I'm still wearing a random tank top over the wrestling shirt that I have to take off. And you see me wearing a glove because I had so much fire shit that I wanted to protect my hand because I was in a very small space making an explosion. So I wanted to protect it. But it's just funny because you see this moment where I have a glove and a shirt where we're like, it's still cool because you're confused of what happened, but me knowing, it's just like, oh yeah, I kind of fucked that up. So then me and Angel wrestle, and we do what we do, and we have some good spots and moments, and we're wrestling, and it's great, and it's a fun match, and it's exciting. There comes a moment where he chases me out of the ring, and I go back up the ramp, and I go through the curtain, but he's got my arm, and as he's got my arm, I make it through the curtain, and you only see him holding my arm through the curtain, but then when he pulls my arm to pull me back out the curtain, it wasn't me, it was Steve Rosano in a wheelchair. Like, what? Steve Rosano was not in good shape there, but he wanted to be a part of the reunion, and we found a way to get him involved in that spot, and it was very cool. And it was the mystery of, well, what happened? You were just holding GQ's hand, and now you pulled out mystery Enterprise member Steve Rosano. Cool. They all start fighting back to the ring. It goes on. So at that point, Steve and Bo Cooper, who was in my corner, who was brawling Bo Cooper for that show, doing my Clockwork Orange style GQ money gimmick, him and Angel and Rosano kind of fight back to the ring. And as they go to the ring and Bo swings him into the ropes, all of a sudden the cameraman gets up on the apron, hard cam style. And all of a sudden as Angel comes in, fireball out of the camera, pull off the hoodie, the Big Vision hoodie and the wig and the headsets. And there was GQ money. Hands go up in the air. I get the pinfall. I pull out the Headblade sponsorship because once again, I was trying to go for this whole sponsorship freaking NASCAR thing at the time where I had Headblade logos on my gear. I was supporting Ab Rocket in the match. I was just trying to be a corporate whore. Was kind of where the character was going.
Well, you were hustling. Hey, like I said earlier in the interview, you were always very good at that as far as just incorporating whatever you could to hustle, to work hard, and to get to where you needed to get to in this business. So there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, what are we all doing on wrestling television when we have this TV time? We all take advantage of that and hopefully use that in a positive way, whether it's wrestling or any kind of entertainment. So no, man, that to me was very creative. But it was also something to where I don't ever remember, like, you had an audience watching a magic show that aren't even realizing, I paid a ticket to see David Copperfield in Las Vegas, whatever. And it's like, I know I'm seeing a magic show. These people were in the audience watching a magic show. They didn't even realize they go into a magic show. So in a way, when they compare magic to kayfabe with wrestling, if you know what a magician or how he's going to do his trick, that's like wrestling kayfabe. Well, here you have in the wrestling world, you have the wrestling fans, kayfabe wise, whatever you want to call it, unwise to this magician magic show they were seeing. So, and you had two tricks in one. Because so once you did the present spot on the stage, oh wow, that was it. Now you're not only were you not expecting that first trick, but because you already saw one trick, you're not expecting to see another one. And that was when you did that second trick, that was like at the moment where you're like, all right, dude, give it up. That was awesome. That was cool, man.
So here's the reality in my head, and I love it. And it was a very cool moment for me to try to create it and pull it off. And I think it was executed well. What's funny is Webb helped me out on the editing on that one too. When you watch the playback.
Yeah.
Because
I remember
because
that, yeah.
On the playback, the moment, it's not even that quick from when I finally disappear with Rosano and then when I reappear. It probably takes over a minute. In my head, when this was happening, I feel it happened 20 seconds later. And then I remember I came through the curtain and I ripped off the clothes, put on the sweatshirt, and sprinted around this building to make this move. I think in reality, my sprint was more of a I'm out of shape jog, and it probably took me a couple of minutes, but like it plays much better on video. But I remember it being a lot slower in real life than I thought it was, because I thought I was like instant quick change, and it's like, nope, that clock's ticking for a while.
That's awesome, man. And that's funny because it's kind of the opposite what you're saying when you fell looking at the stars at Pico Rivera. That one seemed forever. Right, the total opposite.
I ran awesome. Like Usain Bolt through that curtain around the building in record-breaking time.
That's terrific, man. That's awesome. Well, Cold Day in Hell was an awesome show. We didn't know where it was going to go then. You know, we had Big Vision Entertainment, but unfortunately, a lot had to do with the crash of 2008. Big Vision had to cut back and all this stuff. So who knows?
Life went to hell at that point. Like,
yeah,
like,
well, mine too.
Yeah, we went like Big Vision went from being a company that did all this DVD distribution. So for me, I was the DVD author for them, and went from doing, whether it be 10 to 14 titles a month to zero in a week.
And that was when I was. You were doing that. I was the public relations manager of the office. So I would be contacting places like Best Buy, like Fry's Electronics, places like that, talking about distributing DVDs, emails, and all that. And that was like a bulk of my job during the day, and along with the shipping department. But then, like you said, it was just like even our big products like Sci-Fi's Ghost Hunter, stuff like that. It was like overnight. That stuff was like, not obsolete, but at least for the whole process of distributing and all that, it was like everything changed overnight. And this was right about just after Cold Day in Hell. So, you know, it was just a circumstantial thing. We did do XPW 10, but, you know, we were struggling to do that. And that was pretty much the end of it. But what a bookend, Smiley. As far as that, but
and Cold Day in Hell came out on Blu-ray too, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, that was our first Blu-ray. That was the first Blu-ray I authored, which was pretty neat for me.
Again, to describe it to people today, or even young kids right now watching this, like just imagine doing this big, awesome project in like January, February, or early March of 2020, and then this COVID hit. That's kind of where we were at for Cold Day in Hell, in a way, but right before this crash. So there was some talks about how can we continue this, whether it's television or not, or whether it's just like a monthly miniature pay-per-view type thing. These were in the works at that time. But, you know, like I said, unfortunately, just timing wasn't of the essence for us. Before we end this, Smiley, and we'd love to have you back on.
Yeah, take that, Kevin. I'm going longer, baby.
Yeah. You broke the record. Can you believe this?
I'm drenched, too. Look at this. I'm drenched.
So let me ask you this before we go. Can you talk a little bit before we go? Can you talk a little bit what is there anything that you learned from XPW, the WSX to Big Vision Entertainment that applies to your current job right now with WWE?
Similar to what Kevin said, work ethic and working in incredibly extreme and uncomfortable situations to still get by and make the end result happen. So to be able to have that perseverance, dedication, and persistence to make something happen through uncomfortable situations. Rob was demanding. It was intense. The hours were ridiculous. And we worked. But now at the same time, I always considered it very mom and pop, very friendly. I may have done 14 and 16-hour days, but I was never forced to be at work. I was able to still make my own schedule, as stupid as that sounds. But like there was still freedom, even though I had no freedom. And like it was my whole life. So like I learned how to work, man. I learned how to make things happen. I can handle pretty much anything and anyone. Like I can go into any situation I'm at now where people think they're around extreme personalities and big personalities, and it's like, please, you're a softie, you're a little puppy dog. Oh, let me pet you and scratch your ear because you're not what you think you are.
Right.
And it allowed me to go. Now on the flip, it also built my entire skill set. I at XPW was able to enhance my graphic skills, my graphic design skills. I was able to enhance my video editing and skills, my web development, like all of these skills, storytelling, right? Like all of these skills that I use day to day at this point, I gained experience on the job at my time with Xtreme.
And if anything, it definitely helped people being in that office environment and the shows in XPW and around those personalities. It definitely, in the moment, it could have been challenging, but it definitely helped people. It helped me at least, and all of us. Like you said, you're ready for the situation. It helped you step out of the fear of what other people thought, because if you could handle what we went through, then going to a regular office was like a piece of cake. It was child's play, in a way. So no, that's very interesting. And I agreed with Kevin, and that's cool because I think we all have that similar experience. Even going to Big Vision Entertainment, where I'm like, oh, this is just, so nice, so relaxing, so official and professional and all this, for lack of a better word, But hey, Smiley, great not only having you on this interview, but just great catching up with you, my friend.
Absolutely amazing, fun stuff.
Yeah, good stuff, man.
We were going to keep it short and quick, and then look.
Exactly.
And then we probably only got to 30% of what you have written down to ask.
Yeah, exactly. I got a few, but we'll cut it off here. Any parting words as we close here? This is once again the Xtreme Memories with Kris Kloss. Our guest today was GQ Money, aka Fabian Kalin, aka a Rosebud Lemon, aka GQ Money, Ryan Katz. And we want to ask you, please like our channel, subscribe, share this with anybody and everybody that that might be interested in this. Any parting words, my friend?
Yeah, man, talking about memories that really, really matter, because it's all about XPW with Kris Kloss on the Wrestling Chatter.
Couldn't have said it better. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next time. Thank you again, Smiley. We'll talk to you soon. Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Yeah, that's right. Eehaw.
Eehaw.
Thank you for watching Xtreme Memories, hosted by Kris Kloss. He's dropping new episodes every month on the 15th and 30th. You can be the first to tune in by subscribing to the Wrestling Chatter channel right here on YouTube. See you next time.